I got an obnoxious passenger fired. This is a long one, but it was the best revenge story of my life so far. I'm a South African living in Japan, and I took my Japanese wife to meet my parents and have a honeymoon in South Africa. On the first of 3 flights, back to Japan was from Joburg to Qatar. We take our seats and get settled in. I noticed that a lot of the passengers around us were wearing the same t-shirts, some kind of pharmaceutical company. As soon as we got settled in, I noticed that the woman and 2 men sat behind us were also employees of this company. As soon as they got settled in, I noticed she, let's call her Brandy, was quite chatty, loud, and a bit obnoxious. But I am a nervous flyer, so at the time, I was more worried about the takeoff than her. So I put my earpods on and whoosh. We take off for our 8th flight to Qatar. As soon as the seatbelt sign switched off, Brandy started ordering brandy and cokes for herself and her 2 co-workers. As each drink came, Brandy's voice got louder, more obnoxious. After drink number 6, the topic of her conversation turns to relationships. By this time, half the cabin could hear their conversation about how she disapproves of interracial relationships. Even I could hear her through the guttural screams and face-melting guitar riffs of Meshuggah blasting through my earpods. Then it happened. A nice woman sitting on 4 seats to her left quite loudly says, "Mom, could you please quiet down? You're a bit loud and I'm trying to get some sleep." I heard it too, so paused the song and took out my left earpod to excitedly eavesdrop. Brandy was not happy. She says, "Excuse me, this isn't a nighttime flight. Haven't you heard of earplugs?" And then jumps straight back into her conversation. The tension in the air immediately changed. In that moment, all the people who heard the interaction caught eyes with each other, and we all knew this flight was about to get interesting. About 20 minutes later, a flight attendant comes and politely asks Brandy to quiet down a bit. She begrudgingly agrees, orders another round and quiets down. But it only takes Brandy about 30 minutes to get all the way back up to a volume louder than the jet engines rowing outside the windows. Then another Chinese woman from the other side of the cabin gets up and walks to where Brandy is sitting, and in her best attempt at English says, "Please be quiet, my child keeps waking up because of you." Brandy looks up and, "You shit you not?" asks this Chinese woman in very mispronounced Chinese. "Can you speak Chinese?" I'm fluent in Chinese, so I could understand what she was trying to say, and just kept repeating it until the frustrated Chinese woman went back to her seat. By this time, both flight attendants for our cabin were very much aware of Brandy's sassy nature, and decided to close the bar for the whole cabin, which pissed me off because I was hoping to enjoy a few more whiskeys before we landed. A few minutes later, I hear sound of shuffling, then plastic, and then the faint sound of what sounds like the cap of a glass bottle being cracked open. Then the sound of liquid being poured into cups. Yep, Brandy had opened her bottle of duty-free brandy she bought at the airport. And once again their conversation began to crescendo. Now, the whole time I had been spectating the brandy situation, I wasn't really paying attention to my wife, who I assumed was sleeping next to me. I then saw my wife pull one of her earpods out, turn to try and get a look at Brandy through the crack in the seat, and then turn to look at me with a face I rarely see my wife make. It was a face of pure rage and frustration. I snapped. Now usually I'm not the kind of person who likes to cause a scene, but I decided that I'm not going to let this asshole of a woman ruin my wife's flight. So like a crazy person, I stood up and announced loud enough that the entire cabin turned to hear me, "Excuse me everybody. Can I please have all of your attention? By show of hands, who of you would like these people to shut up?" About 30 passengers all around us raised their hands. I then turned to Brandy and just say, "Look. Understand? Shut up." I sat back down to the sound of applause from all the passengers that were raising their hands. My wife was shocked that I did that, but I told her that I did it because I could see that Brandy was beginning to bother you too. She gave me a hug, and the flight attendant that saw what I did brought me a cup of Coke, but slipped me 2 of those little bottles of whiskey. Thankfully, Brandy and the gang then passed out, and were quiet for the rest of the flight. So my wife and I could relax. But Brandy wasn't finished. And now she had a new target, me. On our descent, Brandy awakes and decides that she wants to play some cards on the entertainment screen attached to the back of my seat, trying her best to hit the buttons hard enough to make my seat move. I teach kids for a living, so I know that she is behaving like an angry toddler trying to get a rise out of me, so I ignore her. We land, the plane taxis off the runway, and everyone starts getting up to get off the plane. As soon as I get up and she sees my wife, and she starts repeatedly insulting me about my weight, and how I married an Asian woman because I can't get a real South African woman, blah 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 blah. High school bully level bull's gut. I just smile and nod my head at everything she was saying and exit the plane. Finally, Brandy and her co-workers walk off, and my wife and I find a nice cafe to have a coffee and chill, and stretch for a bit before we make our way to the next boarding gate for our second flight to Malaysia. We eventually get to the gate, and lo and behold, guess who's also flying to Malaysia? That's right. It's Brandy. She's standing by the gate window taking selfies, and doesn't notice me. I find an empty seat next to a guy wearing the same pharmaceutical company t-shirt and say, "Excuse me, sir, that woman over there with blonde hair taking selfie, what's her name?" He asked me why, and I say that she looks like someone I used to go to high school with. But I wasn't sure and didn't want to make an ass of myself asking her directly. He tells me, and I say, "Oh, then it's not her, sorry." I thank him, and for the remainder of the wait at the gate, logged into the airport Wi-Fi, found their company's Facebook page and website, and sent a detailed recount of Brandy's behavior, being sure to include all the colorful things she was talking about with her co-workers. The next 2 flights back to Japan were uneventful and got home safe and sound. 2 weeks later, I get a reply from the CEO asking me for my number as he would like to talk to me about what happened. He calls me and profusely apologizes for what Brandy put us through. Turns out that by the time Brandy landed in Malaysia, the CEO had seen my message, changed her return flight back to South Africa for the very next day, and fired her at arrivals in JHB Airport when she got back. I bought a bottle of brandy and Coke on my way home from work that day to celebrate with my lovely wife. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more videos like this.